Welcome into this special Locked On crossover podcast between the Locked On Louisville and Locked On Boston College podcasts. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Today's episode brought to you by Jase Medical. Empower yourself when you purchase a Jase case, providing you with a personal supply of 5 antibiotics that treat 50-plus infections. Get yours today at jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com. I'm the host of Locked On Louisville, Dalton Pence. With me, the host of Locked On Boston College, AJ Black. AJ, how's it going today?
Dalton, it's doing great. It's fall up here in New England. It's starting to feel it. The heat's gone, and you finally saw some life out of Boston College. So I'm excited to talk a little bit about that with you.
Very true. If you're listening to this, you can't tell, but if you're watching this, obviously, you won't see AJ's face. His camera's having some difficulties, but definitely wanted to get each other on a crossover and talk about this matchup because there's a lot of uncertainty. I feel like, AJ, this is a matchup between Louisville and Boston College historically that it's really hard to tell what's going to happen. You kind of throw spreads out the window. Louisville was supposed to win last year, ended up losing. This year, I felt good coming into last weekend, and then Boston College absolutely shows out against Florida State, comes up a little short, but still plays really well. What were kind of your thoughts on that game very quickly, and how does that affect how you look at this week?
Yeah, I mean, it was a crazy game. For the first two games, you had people talking about putting bags on their heads. You talk to the fans. They're getting down. You lose to NIU, who loses to Southern Illinois the week later. And then you go almost to overtime against, you should have lost against Holy Cross. And then, so, expectations are really low. The morale is really low. And you go into a game where you're 20, depending on which line you're reading. I think FanDuel had them at 28.5. I think minus 28.5 for Florida State. BC goes right out there, shows that they have no fear, and they hold, other than 18 penalties, which was insane. BC should have won that game. They should have won it, and they didn't. But you leave that game now with a quarterback, Thomas Castellanos, who looked dynamic. He put up 400 yards against the Knowles in a very good defensive line. And you're starting to feel maybe, hey, this, even though it was a loss, maybe this is the catalyst that turns things around.
I agree there. I think for Louisville, on the other hand, personally, I mean, the first 4 games of the schedule were always 4 that Louisville fans believed should be must-win games.
Right.
Because you're going to be favored in all 4, and your schedule gets significantly harder in the second slate of 4 games when you play against NC State, Notre Dame, Duke, and Pittsburgh. But I'll be honest with you, I never feel good about a matchup with Boston College because it feels like Louisville. It doesn't matter what the spread is. Like I said, the Cardinals always seem to struggle, whether it's Phil Jurkovec or now Thomas Castellanos. And what worries me most now about Boston College is a quarterback that can run the ball.
Right.
Louisville struggled with Haynes King week 1, a guy that's not necessarily known for running the ball, quarterback containment. With him sort of, putting himself out there, right away against Florida State, showing that he can not only be able to run the ball, but ad-lib on the fly, and that's really, really dangerous. How does that sort of change the offensive identity of this Boston College team?
Oh, it's so different. I mean, the whole quarterback situation at BC has been crazy. I went into week 1, post-game week 1, livid at the coaching staff. As someone who's there, I covered BC for 247. I've been at practices all summer. They threw Emmett Moorhead out at us all summer long. And he was at ACC Media Days. You figured he was going to be the guy, right? They kept talking about Halfley named him the starter the week of the NIU game. He last 2 series, and they pulled him. Like, he wasn't good, but it looked like he was just jittery. So they bring in this guy Castellanos, and he is, a little bit chaotic at first, but he's starting to get more and more comfortable. And I think that's what's exciting. What you saw in the Florida State game is that it's starting to come to him. It's like the first couple of games he made mistakes, and he just got here in August. He was coming from UCF. But he's getting it more, and he's not just a running quarterback. I think that's an easy thing to see when you're watching, and he does make good plays with his legs, but he's not a bad passer either. He's got a pretty good arm, and he's accurate, and he doesn't force throws, which I thought is good for a young quarterback to like not
Sure.
make things try to make things happen. He's really good at just, if it's not there, don't force it in, try to run or just throw it away. And that's been a big positive for him so far. And it's what kept him in the game against Florida State.
This schedule is very interesting. I remember when we did the whole Locked On ACC preview. I remember you saying that this was kind of a season to where something had to go the Eagles' way,
right,
for this coaching staff. And I know that a loss is indeed a loss on the schedule. Florida State has to give you some hope. But now, I mean, you're looking at a potentially big swing. There's a big swing between 2-2 and 1-3. What is really at stake in your opinion? Is there much significance on this game early on in the season for Boston College and more specifically Jeff Heffley?
Yeah, it's a huge game. I have to say, with Hafley, this is a do or die year for him. I think I said this in the ACC preview. Like, he's got to make a bowl game. He cannot go another year without a bowl, especially, as I said, with the schedule. And as the year has gone on, it's unveiling itself to be as what you thought it would be. Like, Virginia Tech is bad. Pitt looks bad. Virginia's bad. UConn's bad. Like, you've got these teams that you should be able to beat to get yourself to a bowl. And if you can't do that, then maybe this isn't the right fit for BC. The game against Louisville is going to be is super important. How critical it is. I mean, yeah, 1-3 is bad, and you don't want to get to that point. It's their first road game. It's BC. This is the first time they're going to have Castellanos on the road, and that in itself is a little worrisome because he had issues with cadence at home where their false starts all over the place. And Hafley was saying it wasn't the offensive lineman; it was Castellanos that was causing it. But bringing him on the road, doing all those things, I anticipate some jitters here. I anticipate that the high flying BC team that you saw at the end against FSU might not be there at first against Louisville until they start to settle in. And at the end of the day, yeah, it's going to be a critical game and one that BC obviously really wants to win. But if they lose it, it's a game at a time right now with this team. Because I could easily see them losing to Louisville. The fans get back down in the dumps. And then they rip off like 4 or 5 wins in a row because it eases up a lot for BC moving forward.
Sure. I agree there. And I think that the situations are fairly different for both teams, obviously, with a new coaching staff. If Louisville still has Scott Satterfield, I think we look at this game so much differently. But now you have Jeff Brom, like I said, and I'll be honest, I think that Louisville fans almost have placed too high of expectations on this team. I went into the offseason thinking, okay, 8 wins is kind of my realistic mark that I'm looking at. And I mean, I'm seeing 10 wins get thrown out, and I'm like, man, year one of a coaching change. Let's kind of pump the brakes a little bit. Is there potential with the schedule to pull it off? I mean, sure, theoretically, but I mean, if you're going to reach that upper echelon of win totals, then Boston College truly is a must-win game because of the 50-50 games that you're going to be exposed to beginning next week. You have a Friday night game in Raleigh against NC State, followed up by Notre Dame at home. So, I mean, you see the importance of this game, but AJ,
you see, like, each school has something big at stake here, right? Like Louisville, to me, as someone from the north who's obviously follows the ACC, it just feels like this program is waiting to try to get to that next step to be part of the powerhouses in the ACC. And a win against BC is so critical for them to get to that point because you need to win those games, right? For BC, it's like almost just staying afloat. Like, you want to win the game to stay afloat. And honestly, like, you're playing a good team that's a little bit more manageable than what you just battled last week. So this is now a more winnable game for BC. Can they win that? I think that's a big piece right there.
I definitely agree. And I'll be honest with you, this is one of those teams that I feel like Louisville fans do a good job of getting a decent understanding of who they're going up against, but I feel like in talking to a lot of fans over the past couple days in group chats, nobody on our side knows what to expect from this Boston College team. So I now want to turn it over and discuss a little bit with you about what fans should know about the Eagles. And we'll do that here momentarily after we talk about our friends and the title sponsor of the show, Jase Medical. Everyone should be empowered to care for themselves and their loved ones during the unexpected. That's why Jase Medical offers the Jase case. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use and gives you a peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical makes sure that you have the medication in hand. It is simple, and they handle everything from the online evaluation to licensed pharmacy medication delivery and ongoing consultation and care. Don't get caught unprepared. Save more than $360 by getting these life-saving antibiotics with Jase Medical, plus an additional $20 off by using Locked On at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's JASE medical.com while using the promo code Locked On. Hey, football fans, once again, thanks again for making Locked On Louisville and Locked On Boston College your respective first listens of the day. College football season is about a quarter of the way through. This season, Locked On is kicking up our coverage with Locked On College Football Kickoff Live. Each Friday, Locked On will go live from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern on every Locked On College YouTube channel. College Football Kickoff Live will cover playoff implications, the conference rivalry games, while going in depth like only Locked On can, including insight and analysis from our stable of Locked On College hosts covering their team every day. Find Locked On College Football Kickoff Live every Friday from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Time on any Locked On College YouTube channel. You won't want to miss it. Heading on into the more analytical portions of the show, we're going to start out with a little Boston College preview for the Louisville fans that are wanting to get to know the foe. AJ Black, host of Locked On Boston College, also is a member of 24/7 Sports. AJ, first and foremost, you mentioned sort of the Jekyll and Hyde between the first 2 weeks and week 3. Was week 3, in your opinion, more so progression, or do you look at it in sort of a fluke situation due to the drastic changes between weeks 2 and 3?
I think the big difference between weeks 1, 2, and 3, the penalties were still there all 3 weeks. I think Louisville fans are going to want to watch this, because one of the things I was talking about with my I have a writer who comes on my show twice a week, and he was saying, when refs know you're a team that has a reputation for penalties, you're not going to get the benefit of the doubt. So
Sure.
Wondering how much this is going to impact the game on Saturday, because BC leads the country in penalty yards right now. Was a big issue the first 2 weeks, and obviously it cost BC. They had Florida State on third down that last game, and they got called for a face mask.
Mm-hmm.
So that was a big issue that we've seen. But the progression, I think, that came through, obviously, was Castellanos in his comfort level as he is developing before your eyes. You're watching him just get more and more comfortable hitting passes he wasn't hitting first 2 weeks. He's doing things, he's understanding the offense well more than he was before. The offensive line, any Louisville fan that watched any BC game last year knew that BC. I mean, if I remember correctly, even when Louisville played them, BC's offensive line was a train wreck. It was a train wreck all year. It's good. They credit to Jeff Hafley. He fixed it in 1 year. He got 2 transfers. Christian Mahogany, who's all ACC, is back, and the guys that are there, Ozzie Trapilo and Drew Kendall, are both developing, which is great. So that's good. The big difference I saw from the first 2 weeks to week 3 is the development of the defense. The defense couldn't stop Holy Cross. They couldn't get off the field against NIU. And against Florida State, they held Florida State to 2 of 10 on third downs. Keon Coleman didn't have a single touch in the game. So you saw the defense really kind of step it up. And that was something we've been waiting for. We thought the defense was going to be like the bread and butter for this team. And it really hasn't been. There's no pass rush right now. They have 1 sack in 3 games. Donovan Azaraku was all ACC going into this season. He has 1 pressure in 3 games. Not good. And so on top of all that, it's kind of made this defense not as dynamic or explosive. So to see them get a fumble return for a touchdown, to get a special teams turnover against Florida State, those were all real positive signs and things that weren't happening in weeks 1 and 2. So I think that's been the big difference.
I need to take this out. My apologies. I'm sitting here looking. I was like, this is not Dalton Pence's show. One thing that I found interesting, AJ, is in the 2 losses, granted small sample size, he ended up coming back against Northern Illinois, but in the 2 losses, double-digit deficits against both teams. Now, granted, the Eagles made it interesting. Is that sort of a trend that you feel like is going to be corrected? I mean, obviously it's early, so you can't really take too large of takeaways from stuff like this, but it seems like, even in the win against Holy Cross, they still trailed in that game. It seems like for Boston College to really reach that ceiling, it's like the offense kind of has to carry the way while the defense kind of figures things out.
Right. You gotta, I think they're hoping that this momentum the defense had in that game. I mean, the second half, BC outscored Florida State at one point from 19-0. Mm-hmm. So you talk to the defensive players, you hear them start really feeling it, and it's what they say, it's what it is, right? But the hope is that maybe that's the catalyst that gets them sparked to get more explosive and get bigger plays, so that you don't fall far behind right off the bat, and you don't have to dig yourself out of these holes over and over again. Mm-hmm. Hafley's never made things easy. I'm gonna say that right now. No matter if it's 2023 or 2020. Every game that Jeff Hafley has coached, other than maybe Colgate his first year or second year, BC has had to claw and scratch, whether it's UMass, Texas State, Louisville last year. I mean, you name the games that they've even won, they've never been able to put teams away. And when they fall behind, all the games kind of feel the same. Even if they end up winning or they end up losing, they're always clawing and scratching. There's never big wins for them. Even Steve Adazio, who I couldn't stand as a coach, when they played lesser teams, they would put them away. Jeff Hafley doesn't do that, and I think that's a cause of concern. But we'll have to, the other end of the coin is that he plays better teams and holds his own against those teams, whether they win or lose them. They're not getting their doors blown off most years. Sure. So I think that's kind of what the hope is, that maybe they kind of figure things out moving forward.
I never have said that Louisville is one of the toughest places to play in the country. I think that in the right circumstance, fans can make it a little hectic, but still a conference game on the road, it's still a tall task regardless of who it is, unless the team is just absolutely unable to be serious on the football field. Boston College's first true road game of the season. Initial thoughts on, playing away from the Northeast and how large of a factor that'll play, if any, for this team on Saturday.
I think 2 big factors that I worry about when it comes to playing on the road. Obviously, Castellanos is the big one. He hasn't started an away game yet. I'm not sure how he's going to react to that. He's learning so much on the fly right now and trying to pick things up that this could be a culture shock for him. I mean, he came out, just to give your listeners a more of a context. His first game against Holy Cross, he got nailed with 2 personal foul calls. One of them was he was running out of bounds on a 3rd down run and was pointing at the defender, like taunting him. And that ended up being a 15-yard penalty. Also, the fun part of that was he wasn't even in for a first down. He was 1 yard shy of the first down, which Jeff Hafley was livid after that.
I can only imagine.
And then after another play, he did the old hand motion that people make with their what do you call it? I don't want to say because we're censored, but you know what I mean, like down there at the opponents, and it was caught on national television. So they had to kind of kind of bring him back in, because Hafley said if he kept doing it, he was going to bench him.
Sure.
Completely different kid next week. But with the pressure of an away team, playing on the road, how is that going to impact him? Is he going to be able to handle that? Like it's different when you're playing at home in front of a fan base that loves you, but when you're playing on a hostile environment, are you going to have moments where you lose it? And I'm worried about that. And then penalties, all sorts of pre-snap and stupid penalties that BC makes. I think on the road it's going to get exacerbated. So if it gets exacerbated, oh my gosh, they set their own team record with 18 school record with 18 penalties last week. If they beat that, I'm gonna have a whole week of shows just based on penalties.
Yeah, no, and that's pretty. It's pretty rough. I hope that that's not the case for your sake, but want to flip the coin and give your listeners a little bit of a better understanding of what Louisville brings to the table in a new era of Cardinals football. We'll allow you to answer any or ask any questions you have here momentarily after we talk about our friends over at FanDuel. Snap into action this NFL season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can get $200 back in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets, win or lose with a $5 bet. If you've been thinking about joining FanDuel, there's no better time to get in on the action. The app is so easy to use, from spreads, player props, over-unders, whatever you can think of. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and kick off the NFL season. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. Final segment of this special crossover podcast between Locked On Louisville and Locked On Boston College. I'm Dalton. He is AJ. AJ, I'll allow you the floor, man. Any questions you have about Louisville?
All right. Yeah, I've got a bunch. So,
okay.
I think BC fans, we got used to seeing Scott Satterfield, and I know a lot of Cardinals folks weren't really high on what he was doing with the program and felt that there was a lot of missed opportunities there. And based off of people I've talked to, people I've heard, it seems like Jeff Brom was the perfect hire for the Cardinals. And it seems like it's paying off both on the field and in the transfer portal and recruiting. Can you just talk a little bit about like what he's brought to Louisville and what you've noticed the first 3 weeks of the season?
Energy. I think that's kind of what I keep coming back to. It felt like, and this is no disrespect to Sat. I mean, I felt like he left the program better than in which he found it, which, grateful for that. But it just seemed like the program, at least the fan base, was almost getting lethargic with kind of the same old narrative, losing the same old close games year in, year out. And it felt like, there was a case to be made that he shouldn't be back for another year, which thankfully Cincinnati did U of L a solid and made that decision for them. So Jeff Brom is the prodigal son, a player or a guy that played here, coached here, is from here, gets the fan base involved, and brings the juice on the field. He has a saying, it's a street fight in between the whistles. So that's something that, he brings that fire. Now, granted, this team hasn't been perfect through the first 3 weeks, but they've already been better at finishing games early on in the first 3 games of the Brom era than probably ever in the Satterfield era. So that's pretty much the thing that jumps right off the page.
All right. And now, it seems like it went from, they were obviously rather quarterbacks, but in my brain, it goes like Lamar Jackson right to Malik Cunningham. Pat's fan. I loved watching him play, by the way. This summer was great. Now you got Jack Plummer, who takes over, as starting quarterback. What have you seen so far from him, and what does he do well, and where do you think he needs to improve?
Well, I think it's kind of been up and down. First game showed he was a little rusty. Second game is against an FCS opponent, so it's hard to really determine that. Week 3 against Indiana looked solid first half. Second half, when pressure was brought from Tom Allen, he struggled. The main thing with him that he's had some issues with is just indecisiveness, hesitation on the reads. And, when a quarterback makes or has hesitation on those reads, nothing good comes from it. So the receivers are consistently creating separation, which is boding well for the offense with Jabari Thrash, who in my opinion is a top 2 receiver in the conference right now.
Yep.
Ultimately, I mean, he has had some moments to where he has looked like a very, very good quarterback, better than he did last year at California. But there's also times where it shows that he needs to be a little bit more comfortable with his reads, and hopefully with more reps in this scheme and with this personnel situation, it's going to get better. But it's been a little bit of a talking point through the first 3 weeks. And I think week 4 is definitely something that people are realizing is pretty urgent in that regard. So,
and You mentioned Jamari Thrash, and there's a couple playmakers that have really stood out in the first couple of games for the Cardinals, and it's Jawar Jordan, your running back, who leads the country in yards per carry with 10.47, and Thrash, who I mean, every time I turn on a game, it seems like he's making a big catch. Can you talk a little bit about the weapons Brom has and how they've been utilizing them and what they do for this offense?
Yeah, so Brom's sort of philosophy, and what we had to tell a lot of Louisville fans is that this isn't an air raid offense. This is a pro style offense that throws the ball more than Scott Satterfield's offense. So there's been a healthy mixture of three running backs and Jawar Jordan, Isaac Garendo, and Maurice Turner. Jordan, obviously, the feature back that gets the majority of the touches and has been fantastic. Was fantastic last year when his number was called. So the running back committee's kind of been a great surprise for the fan base and how stable it is. Top 5 rushing attack in the country right now. And through the first 3 games, no one has been able to check Jamari Thrash one-on-one. If Plummer makes a couple more throws, then, I mean, he could be potentially leading the country in receiving yards. It's that incredible of separation. But I will say that, there's some other weapons on this team. Kevin Coleman Jr., Amari Huggins, Bruce, Jimmy Callaway, some other receivers to focus on. The main thing I'll tell you and tell the Boston College fans listening, this is a totally different wide receiver core than what you would have seen last year. A lot of transfers in, Kevin Coleman transfer, Jamari transfer, Jimmy Callaway transfer, Jaden Thompson transfer. So, credit Brom and company. It's going to be a very balanced offense, but expect a lot of workload to Jamari Thrash, and Louisville's going to do their very best to establish the run right away.
All right, and on the defensive side, the name that always pops out to me is Ashton Gillette. Is I got that right?
Gelati.
Wow, way off. Gelati.
You're a Patriots fan, so it evens out. I see the inspiration.
Yep, but what makes him so? I mean, I looked at his numbers. I'm like, man, he's in on a ton of quarterback pressures. What makes him so dangerous? And what are some other names on defense we should be watching out for?
Yeah, Ashton came in as a freshman, came in a semester early and added like 45 pounds in one semester and went from being a redshirt candidate to, oh, crap, this guy's going to play. He's going to play a lot. And thankfully, he was able to learn from Yasir Abdullah and Yaya Diaby, who were premier pass rushers for the past couple seasons. But now he is the guy. And although some of those pressures haven't been turning into sacks this season, he's still getting after the quarterback. And I expect, some of those sacks to start coming to fruition soon. He's been fantastic, just extremely quick off the edge. The strength finally equates with the burst that he has. So there's that. Some other guys, this is a very secondary led team. Quincy Riley, Storm Duck, the transfer from UNC, and Jarvis Brownlee will lead this team. There's also some solid defensive backs in the safeties room. I wouldn't necessarily say there's one guy that stands out outside of Gelati. This is probably as balanced as this defense has been probably in about a decade.
Wow. Yep. So, okay. Yeah. I mean, you look at the statistics, and I know you have the FCS game in there, but sure, they look like a well-balanced team. And finally, you asked me about it. What does Louisville have to do to win this game?
Yeah, I mean, I think that for Louisville, the name of the game is consistency. I think the last game was the telltale sign. First half looked like this team was going to win by 50. Second half, thankfully, this team was up by 21 because they would have lost if they weren't. It's playing 4 quarters of quality football. Georgia Tech, 3 good quarters, but the bad thing is the 1 quarter they allowed 28 points. Murray State, it is what it is, but it's the consistency aspect. If Jack Plummer, number one, Jack Plummer has to be the Jack Plummer that we need him to be. And if he's able to do that and move the ball down the field, and Louisville's able to put up points like we know they can do, I think that they're in a solid situation. And just being consistent, limiting the big plays. I think one thing that Louisville's been very prone to doing, not only this season, but in years past, it's almost like an MO for this program, is allowing quarterbacks to flee the pocket and run. And that's something that Louisville really has to keep in check this week. So limiting the big plays and being consistent.
And my last question has nothing to do with football, but it's an away game, and there's BC fans, I think, that are going to be going down there that listen to this podcast. Yeah. For fans traveling, what's a great brewery or food spot they need to hit up? in Louisville?
Oh man, put me on the spot. There's honestly a lot of great places to go check out. I won't recommend specific spots. I'm going to recommend specific areas. Definitely check out Bardstown Road in the Highlands. It's a very unique feel. Went up to Boston a couple of years ago, and the Highlands gives me a very Boston-like feel, like downtown historic Boston type feel. So be sure to check out the Highlands. Anywhere around the stadium, Louisville's done a great job of increasing fan experience. So be sure to stick around, the Louisville campus and definitely the Highlands.
All right, that's my last question for you, Dalton.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Appreciate everyone for tuning in. Like I said, for all the coverage on the Boston College Eagles, on the Louisville Cardinals, be sure to tune in to the Locked On Boston College podcast, the Locked On Louisville podcast. I'm Dalton Pence. He is AJ Black. Be sure to tune in. These two podcasts cover your team 5 days a week, your team every day.